Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Glad to have you along for our discussion today. We're going to be talking about an issue that has come up in Michigan at Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And this is the promotion of the LGBTQ movement at Eastern Michigan University. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple things. One is I'm going to go back about 10 years to a lawsuit and a controversy in the counseling department where we saw a woman, a young African-American woman, Julia Ward, who was dismissed because she would not counsel same-sex relationships in the counseling in her training. It says Eastern Michigan University has agreed to settle a former graduate student's lawsuit accusing its officials of violating her constitutional rights by dismissing her from its counseling program. So they kicked her out because she would not counsel same-sex people. A federal appeals court in January ordered the university to defend itself against charges it had kicked Julia Ward out of its master's program because, for religious reasons, she wanted to refer gay clients to others rather than counsel them herself. The university had asserted its right to enforce its department's requirements based on outside groups' ethics codes, that students counsel all clients in affirming, non-judgmental ways. So they wanted all of their counseling students to affirm and be non-judgmental toward all kinds of sexual, immoral, perverted practices. So this was the issue. But now recently I have been noticing that was 10 years ago. I have been noticing around the Detroit area, whenever I'm in that area, that we see signs up all over the place. For example, here is one on Michigan Interstate I-96 heading into Detroit, and it's a billboard. And it boasts that Eastern Michigan University is #1 LGBTQ university in Michigan. So they are proud of the fact that they are now promoting the LGBT, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer friendly university in Michigan. It's the #1. So they are now boasting. They have gone all in. So after this lawsuit 10 years ago, I guess they decided that no more half measures. We're going to go all in, and we're going to promote lesbianism. We're going to promote gay homosexuality. We're going to promote bisexuality. We're going to promote transgenderism. So they're all in on the transgender train. And they're going to promote queerism, gender binary, gender fluid. They're going to embrace all of the 52, what is it, up to 52 now, pronouns. They're going to embrace the whole, they, their, they, zir, the insanity of the entire LGBTQI plus whatever movement. They're all in. Eastern Michigan is now all in on the sexual, immoral, pervert bandwagon. Eastern Michigan. This is a state-funded university in Michigan, and they claim to be #1 LGBTQ. So if you're a sexual deviant pervert, go to Eastern Michigan University. That's what they're saying. And this all started back, say, 10 years earlier, when they decided that they were going to kick a Christian student out, a Christian student who simply said, I cannot in good conscience actually counsel couples who are in the same-sex relationship. I won't try to do so-called marriage counseling. I won't do what so-called couples counseling. That is against my moral standards as a Christian, and so I can't do it. And they said, fine, but you have to leave because that's who we are. And they took that stand. They lost in a court of law. They had to pay her $75,000 in damages. But yet, after that experience, they've decided, okay, now we just didn't go far enough. Let's hear from Julia Ward, the actual woman who was discriminated against in 2010, and let's hear what she has to say describing her situation.
Julia Ward, a graduate student from Eastern Michigan University, followed her Christian conscience and respectfully denied instructions to counsel an individual regarding a same-sex relationship in which he was involved. However, her counseling supervisor had a problem with Julia's decision.
Following week, I was told that she would be scheduling an informal review because she, out of all of the years she'd been teaching, had never encountered somebody that refused to counsel homosexuals. Now, I had never refused to counsel homosexuals. I had simply refused to affirm their lifestyle. They kind of went over with me.
Okay, so you see the coercion here. The counseling department had a problem from its perspective, and that was that there was a Christian counseling student who simply refused to affirm, and actually what the LGBTQ movement says, celebrate this same-sex relationship because it goes against the moral standards of this Christian woman. So you have to give her a hand that she actually was willing to stand strong and not cave in. But the problem, the so-called problem, really wasn't a problem because this woman was willing to refer these clients, these homosexual clients, to other counselors, which a counselor has a right to refer, or if they think that they're not equipped or they don't think that there's a conflict of interest. It's a similar way you might say a judge. I talked about on another program that there was a judge who had a Planned Parenthood case before her, and this judge had actually been contributing to Planned Parenthood and actually had argued a lawsuit on behalf of Planned Parenthood. And now this was a judge, and she needed to say, hey, I need to recuse myself and pass this on to another judge. But she didn't because she wanted to push the pregnancy Planned Parenthood agenda. But this counselor, if there's a conflict of interest or she doesn't feel comfortable or it goes against her values, she can refer someone. Okay, that's the way it's done all the time. But the counseling department at Eastern Michigan University said, no. We want all of these students to affirm all of our clients. So no matter what client comes in, no matter where they're at, it could be lesbian, it could be a gay, homosexual man, it could be a bisexual individual, it could be a transgender person, a boy who claims he's a woman or a woman who claims she's a man. And it could be any number of these sexual, deviant, perverted sexual acronyms, LGBTQ plus IA, whatever they have in their head. This counselor was being told, well, you need to affirm them, whatever they're at, whatever they think of themselves. If they think of themselves as a furry, you need to sit down and seriously act as if and affirm them in their furry beliefs. That's a crazy, weird sexual fetish now, the furries. And it goes on and on. It's an endless thing. In other words, she has to sit there and basically affirm their folly. They have, if they're mixed up, mentally disturbed in their gender identity, she needs to go ahead and affirm their incredibly mixed up mental state. And she said, no, that is not my Christian belief. I will refer people who are in these sexually deviant, perverted lifestyles, I will refer to them to some other counselor who has no problem counseling with a sexually immoral, depraved, perverted person, and that will be the solution. Well, the counseling department at Eastern says, no, that's not acceptable. We want all of our students to not only counsel these people, but affirm them and affirm them in what they're doing. She said, no, I can't do that. So they kicked her out.
I had simply refused to affirm their lifestyle. They kind of went over with me my position, which was the fact that I could not affirm homosexuality because of my relationship with Christ.
And that's a key point. Every true Christian cannot just simply sit there and tell people who are committing sin and moral depravity, they cannot just sit there and say, oh, that's nice, I'm glad for you, and act like everything's okay. It's not okay. When you see sin, it's not okay, and you can't affirm sin. You're not loving that person by affirming them in their sin. You're affirming them in their mental illness, and that's wrong. That is not the place of a counselor. Counselor is to bring them to a point of health and not just simply affirm whatever the people come in with.
And they went on to say that because of my stance, I was in violation of the code of ethics and that I had three options that I could choose.
Okay, so she's being accused of violating a code of ethics. So in other words, here she is taking a moral stand, an ethical stand, to not violate her Christianly formed conscience. And her conscience was evidently formed by the Bible, by the universal teachings of the Christian church for 2,000 years, by every church that actually is a church and believes the Bible. She was informed. Her conscience was well formed. She was actually ethically being informed. And now the Eastern Michigan University Counseling Department is calling her on the carpet for violating ethics. Well, what I might ask, what ethical standard is she violating? Because she's upholding the moral, ethical standard of right and wrong. And they're saying, no, you're violating the moral, ethical standard of right and wrong as a counselor. So obviously their values are a mile apart. And this is the problem that we face as Christians today in a secular culture. Our values are miles apart from the pagan, immoral, perverted, sexual deviant culture. And Isaiah said it well in the Bible when he warned that they would call up, down, and down up, and truth false, and false truth, and right wrong, and wrong right. They would flip everything upside down. And that's what these revolutionaries, these LGBTQ, democratic, leftist, liberal revolutionaries want to do. They want to turn everything upside down. They want to turn all morality upside down. They totally reject God's rights and wrongs, and they want to call her on the carpet for ethical violations. They want to accuse her of being immoral and being unethical, which is so ironic. They're the ones that need to be rebuked, and the Lord will rebuke them at some point. But can you imagine this godly Christian woman is being called unethical? No, she is the ethical one in the room.
The first option was to take part in a remediation program, which would basically show me the error of my ways.
So they were going to put her into some kind of a counseling program, a program that would get her brainwashed into the thinking of the LGBTQ revolution. And she was going to have to undergo, quote, counseling, very reminiscent of the communist socialism that the USSR implemented all over the world 25 years ago or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where if you were not in line with what the Communist Party taught, then you would be sent to these concentration camps where you would go undergo, quote, counseling until your beliefs lined up with the Communist Party's beliefs. And those could change on a dime, and you would have to also change on a dime with those beliefs. So that's where she was headed. They wanted her to undergo this program of an indoctrination and brainwashing so that they would browbeat her and pressure her and intimidate her into seeing it the way they see it. It's kind of like 1984. Remember the techniques they used in that 1984 George Orwell's book, where they would try to break people's minds so that they would actually see things the way the state wanted you to see them? Well, that's the way Eastern Michigan University wanted to treat this woman.
The second was to voluntarily withdraw myself from the master's program at Eastern University. And then the third option was...
So they were asking her, one of the options with this problem as a solution would be for her to just simply quit college and withdraw from her program. So here she's working along for this counseling degree, and she reaches a state where, no, I won't affirm same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships, the whole LGBTQ ethical moral perversion. I won't affirm that. I want to be a counselor. I want to counsel people in real issues, and I'm not going to affirm these evil, sinful lifestyle issues. I don't want to be that kind of a counselor. And they said, okay, well, then you can quit. You can quit the program. That's how we can deal with this, because we're training counselors to affirm sexual perverts. And if you're not willing to do that, well, you're going to have to leave. And that was her second option they gave her. And then the third option
was to request a formal review hearing where they would actually bring in more counseling faculty to kind of look at the situation and make a decision. And so I elected to do the formal review.
Okay, so she assumed that she would get a fair hearing. She assumed that there would be some kind of a process whereby she could actually get a fair trial, and they would listen to the evidence, and that there would be reasonable minds involved. But as we see, this is not what happened.
I thought that perhaps in the formal review hearing that there would be some understanding and that there would be some tolerance. But I was met with more intolerance. In fact, I was questioned about my Christianity in terms of whether or not I felt my brand of Christianity was better than somebody else who called themselves a Christian.
Okay, so she was getting the old treatment that basically they came to her and said, hey, you know, there are lots of Christians who have no problem with affirming the LGBTQ sexual immoral lifestyle of all these clients. And what they're referring to is liberal Christianity, because there are lots of United Methodists, lots of United Presbyterians, a lot of Church of Christ people, the whole liberal progressive Christianity movement. They all affirm this. They're all on board with legalized abortion. They have no problem with that. They're all on board with the LGBTQ movement. In fact, many of their clergy are LGBTQ. They're lesbian, gay. A lot of lesbian pastors, for example, in the United Methodist Church. We're not even getting into the discussion of the illegitimacy of women pastors, but the women pastors in the United Methodist Church, there are lots and lots of lesbians. And there are now, in the Episcopal Church, there are lots of gay, homosexual men, clergy. There are even transgender pastors and ministers at these liberal denominational churches. And so the board on this counseling inquiry said, well, hey, why is your brand such a narrow-minded brand of Christianity? Look at all these other denominations and Christians, and they're okay with this. And so they were trying to pressure her to water down her Christian faith to this liberal, wishy-washy, compromised faith. And that's not their role as an inquiry board, to try to pressure her in her faith, to try to teach her theology, to try to tell her, hey, look at these other Christians, they don't have a problem with this. What's wrong with your Christianity? Well, the problem is that these other Christians, so-called Christians, the liberal Christians, they have the problem because they're compromisers. They're traitors to the Bible. They will compromise to the liberal political movements. They will compromise with the secular humanists, the worldly values of paganism. They will compromise. And now this godly Christian, biblical Christian, is now being tempted and pressured to try to join their ranks. And she said, no, I'm not going to compromise my faith, and don't tell me what Christianity is. In your capacity, you have no legitimacy to do that.
Who called themselves a Christian. And so after the formal review, they told me that I would be informed within a week as to their decision. And within a week, I did receive their decision. Unanimously, they decided to expel me from the program.
Unanimously, they expelled her. So the counseling department at Eastern Michigan University, training students to be counselors, expelled her unanimously. There was not even one vote in her favor, and they kicked her out of the program. This is where Eastern Michigan really started its radical views on sexual immorality.
And so I did contact the Alliance Defense Fund. I felt that it was important, and my husband agreed, that we find someone that's going to have a Christian perspective. And ADF has that Christian perspective, and I think that makes all the difference in the world.
So she found a Christian organization that would defend her. And as the article stated before that I read from, she was awarded $75,000 in damages. But the unfortunate thing is that it did not change the university. It says here, the resolution of the lawsuit leaves the university policies, programs, and curricular requirements intact. Our faculty retains its right to establish in its learned judgment, oh, what arrogance, the curriculum and program requirements for the counseling program. So, in other words, to be a part of the counseling program, you have to affirm sexual immorality. You have to affirm sexual perversion and deviancy. You have to say, that's okay with me. Okay, that is something that no true Christian can do. And even though that she was awarded $75,000, it eventually put this university on a trajectory to become, like I said before, one of the, if not the most LGBTQ-friendly universities in the state of Michigan. What a sad, sad tale of how a college has lost its vision. You know, its vision is to educate its students. Its calling and mission is not to indoctrinate students into the LGBTQ sexual liberation movement. But they have become so politicized, they have so much corrupted the educational system there. Now, if you go on campus, for example, right now, and you walk around the whole campus, you will see these big banners up with pictures of students, actual students, big, huge, 10-foot high banners with pictures of students, 3, 4, 5-foot high pictures, and little sayings like, we are totally inclusive community. We accept everyone. No one is rejected here. All are welcome here. All are welcome here. But see, that is a lie, because all are not welcome at Eastern Michigan University at the present moment. Why? Because they don't welcome Bible-believing, historic Christians. They will actually kick Christians out of, for example, the counseling program if they don't affirm immorality and sexual deviant perversion. If, for example, if you want to use biblical illustrations, if you are someone who rejects the practices of Sodom and Gomorrah, you are not welcome at Eastern Michigan University. But if you affirm the values of Sodom and Gomorrah, even though God's wrath and judgment destroyed those cities in the Old Testament as a symbol of God's hostility and opposition to all forms of sexual deviancy and moral perversion, if you don't affirm Sodom and Gomorrah behavior at Eastern Michigan University, you cannot be a counseling student. You cannot get a counseling degree. They discriminate against you, so you are not welcome at Eastern Michigan University, even though the mottos and the slogans say everyone is welcome here. We affirm everyone. We invite everyone on campus. We accept everyone on campus. No, that is not true. If you are a Bible-believing Christian, you are not affirmed, you are not accepted, you are not invited on campus. And so what's going to happen is that this university is going to attract all of the sexual deviants in the state, in the Midwest, because they come from all over the different states, not just Michigan. You're going to have all of these sexual, moral, deviant perverts come on the campus of Eastern Michigan University, and then the university is not going to be a place where anyone wants to get an education because it's so politicized, and it will be the ruin of Eastern Michigan University. So let's watch in the next few decades, and I predict that this university will meet its demise, it will end, and it will probably maybe not go out of business, but it may just dwindle down to just a shadow of what it once was, because God does not bless this kind of sinful behavior. Hope that's been a helpful commentary. We'll see you back next week. God bless.